Thank you, Janet and Grace, David, others in the worship team, the men that are running the sound booth so that we can hear and participate. Alan for the beautiful slides. For those, Agnes and others that helped with the coffee and the setup. What a great day to be together with brothers and sisters in the Lord. I want to talk to you a little bit about your Bible. Some of you have a Bible that has what's called a red letter edition. And that means that in your New Testament, as you look through the Bible, the words of Christ have been written in red. Some of you have a Russian Bible. And that means that whenever I read in English the 23rd Psalm, you read the 22nd Psalm. Because the Russian translation of the Bible follows a different order than the English translation of the Bible. As I was in Russia, there was a woman that I never met, but she lived in St. Petersburg, and she had a Russian Bible, and for a foreigner learning the Russian language, the accent mark was extremely important. And this woman took a pencil and went through the entire Bible and marked every single Russian word, every single accent mark. And I still use that Bible if I'm invited to preach in a Russian-speaking situation. Mindy and I celebrated our 4th anniversary this past week, March 22nd. It's been a busy week for us. Last Sunday, we left Budapest on the bus. We got home to our apartment in Prague about 12:30 last Sunday night. All day Monday, going until 5:30 in the morning Tuesday. We were working, packing everything that we could from our apartment in Prague. Got about 3 hours of sleep. I went to bed about 5:30 in the morning Tuesday morning and got back up about 8:30. As Tuesday morning, there were people in Prague that met us and helped us pack everything into the moving van. A lady named Petra drove the van from Prague here to Budapest. Providentially, it is interesting because she is a young lady with two young children whose husband died 2 years ago. And the way your life has interlaps with other people's lives, and the way that you can share during a 5-hour van ride, and who knows, it's possible that someday in the future, a lady who drives a moving van might actually come back to Budapest and visit us again. We were greeted here in Budapest by so many of you, brothers and sisters in the Lord, and in less than 2 hours, everything was completely unloaded off of that van into our new apartment. And we don't have our dining room table yet, but another brother has taken care of all the details, and he's been working quietly behind the scenes so that on Thursday of this week, the final shipment of our belongings will be brought to our apartment. We don't have to unload these. The company's bringing them to us. It's been a great, great week of blessings. But returning to the Bible, Mindy and I made a decision when we got married 4 years ago that we would buy 2 identical Bibles. They're simple Bibles. And during the first year of our marriage, we would both read completely through the Bible chronologically. And at the end of our first year of marriage, we would exchange the Bibles. So that whatever little marks Mindy had made in the Bible, I would then have. And whatever notes I made in the Bible, Mindy would then have. She was much more faithful, men, during the first year of marriage in her Bible reading than me. She finished, as you're supposed to, on December 31st. Her husband was behind in his chronological Bible reading, and it took him, me, several more days to catch up. But 2 years ago, we started a new tradition. I did. Mindy and I have 4 adult children. 3 of them are married. We currently have 7 grandchildren. And we are expecting our 8th grandchild. And I took that Bible that was mine from that first year of marriage 2 years ago, and I gave it to our youngest twin daughter, and I bought another Bible, and I asked my daughter, would you read chronologically with your father through the Bible through the entire year? And at the end of the year, I'm going to give you this Bible, and then you're going to give that Bible back to me. And my daughter, for the rest of her life, now has a Bible that whatever came to her father's mind, she has that. I am now into the second year of what will be a 7-year plan. Because this year, I bought another Bible, this Bible, and our daughter Rachel will inherit this Bible that has notes like the first sermon I preached as pastor at Budapest. My daughter Rachel will inherit a Bible that has notes that says, on the train from Prague to Budapest. The underlining in those sections is horrible because it's just shaking. Dads, this is a long-winded place I'm going. I would encourage you to create a legacy and a heritage for somebody that you care about. In fact, I would encourage all men to create a heritage or a legacy that you could pass along. You, even if you are not married, are somebody's very favorite uncle. You are somebody's example of the best Christian that they work with in the company. You are the example in the neighborhood of the most authentic Christian men that somebody has ever known. And of course, you can read the Bible chronologically, or you can read it any other way that you want to. And you can keep that Bible just for yourself. But I would challenge every man in this congregation to consider getting a simple Bible. There was a Russian lady who took the time and effort to mark every single word so that a foreigner could have a better opportunity to preach passable Russian. Somebody years ago had the idea to make red-lettered editions of the Bible. Now, I don't know anyone who's ever made an edition of the Bible like this. But today, as we look at Genesis chapter 17, verses 18 and 19, this is a profoundly heavy message for me. They are three simple verses. And in fact, the way they line up, they're kind of easy to remember. Genesis 17, 18, 19. If you can get the first number, you get the next two. It goes 17, 18, 19. Last week, as we began looking at Abram in Genesis chapter 12, I encouraged you to consider two 12s, Genesis 12 and Exodus 12. And I also encouraged you to consider the two great commandments. And I said to you that you would be amazed if you truly understood God's call to Abram, and if you truly understood Exodus 12, if you truly understood loving the Lord your God with all your heart, and loving your neighbor as yourself, if you understood those two 12s and those two great commandments, I said to you that you would be amazed how often you would see that reflected in the Bible. I didn't know it when I said it last Sunday, but even this Friday, when I was at a home study Bible group, and we were reading Acts chapter 7, one of the key passages was Genesis chapter 12. And as Mindy and I were able to participate with the men and the women yesterday, and the speaker spoke, and she emphasized the great significance and the impact of the Passover. She didn't quote Exodus 12. And I don't know anyone who has ever done this to a Bible, but if someone would take these four passages and would attentively and carefully read throughout the Bible, I know in my heart that as the red letter edition just jumps off the page, that it would jump off the page to you and I again and again how important Genesis 12 and Exodus 12 are, and how important it is for you and I to understand that we are to love the Lord our God and we are to love our neighbor as ourselves. In Genesis chapter 17, verse 18, and Abraham said to God, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before you." God said, "No. But Sarah your wife shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac." This is such a heavy message for me, because I was greatly impacted by a man years ago who said, "Be careful. Anytime you ever criticize someone in the Bible, you're going to spend eternity with that person in heaven." And what are they going to say to you when you make it to heaven and they say, "Okay, you said I did this. You said I thought that. You said who are you to criticize me?" We watch one sports event after another, and we are professional criticizers. Why didn't he hit the ball? Why didn't she run faster? Why couldn't they get their act together? In this day and age of email and internet and Facebook, we have become blatant criticizers. We have the audacity to put things in writing that we would never say to someone face to face. But behind the anonymity of electronics, we will communicate to people. So please hear me carefully. There are several things to remember. When we read Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3, that was our text last week. Abram needs to do one thing. Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And if Abram will go where God shows Abram to go, then God promises to do 7 additional things. And I will make of you a great nation. And I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Man of God, did you bless anybody this last week? That is your assignment. Mindy and I have received so many blessings this past week. How will I ever repay all that men and women have done for Mindy and me just in this past week? 4 years ago, it was also April 1st. Next Sunday is April 1st. 4 years ago, it was April 1st. And my newly beloved wife began her first day, no joke, of cancer treatment. And there were men and women around the world who prayed for my precious bride. And 4 years later, that cancer has now been in remission for 3 years. How can I ever repay brothers and sisters who are willing to say, can I pray for you? Is there something on your heart? Oh, you bet there is. Oh, please. I'm okay. But pray for my bride. All the families of the earth, Abram, if you will go where I tell you to go, I am going to bless you. But it is not just so that you can receive blessings. It is so that all the families of the earth will be blessed. Somebody is living in your building. If you do not share the good news of Jesus Christ with that person living in your building, they will never hear the good news of Jesus Christ, because you are the only Christian in Budapest, regardless of what country you came from. You are the only Christian in that building who will share a Bible, who will share a verse, who will share a cup of cold water in the name of Jesus. If you and I do not bless others, they will not spend eternity in heaven. They will spend eternity in hell. God's plan from Genesis chapter 12 is to bless a man who has no children and to say to him, you will become the father of multitudes. If you will go where I tell you to go, I will bless you. But it is not so that you can receive all the blessings. It's so that you can be a blessing. God's plan has not changed. He continues to bless you and I. When I have been given so much, what will I give to others? And Abram does go, and he proves to be one of the most outstanding men in history. Jews, Christians, and Muslims all claim Abraham as their spiritual father. In Genesis chapter 12, verse 4, when he is 75 years old, Abram goes. If we read the very last verses of Genesis chapter 11, we will see that Abram's relative started to go to Canaan land, but he got to Haran, and he just hung out at Haran. And some of you know in your hearts that God is calling you to go someplace, but oh, it's so comfortable hanging out in Haran. It's so comfortable just living the lifestyle that I'm used to living, singing the songs that I like to sing, playing the video games that bring me entertainment. Watching the TV shows that I like to watch. And yes, my dearly beloved bought me a TV series show that I like to watch as our anniversary present. But Abram goes, and in Genesis chapter 12, verse 7, he worships, he builds an altar. And in Genesis chapter 15, verse 6, when he's about 85 years old, he believes. And later on in Genesis chapter 17, verse 5, his name is changed from Abram to Abraham. Chapter 21, verse 5, when he's about 100 years old, 25 years later, God said, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to make you the father of a nation. And he waits not for 9 months, not for 9 years, but 25 years go by before that promised son. God has spoken to your hearts. God has given you a promise. Hang on to that promise that God's given you. And in Genesis chapter 22, verse 18, when he's estimated to be 112 years old, we still see that Abraham obeyed. Here's the most frightening part of my message, because here comes the criticism. Unfortunately, if Abraham does have a flaw, it seems to be that at crucial moments he tries to fix things instead of continuing to faith things. That is horrible English, but maybe it makes sense. I heard another preacher point this out years ago in my life. I wanted to be, in America, what is called an industrial arts teacher. I wanted to teach other young men and women how to build things with their hands, carpentry projects. In my job, being the overseer of missionaries all across the country of Russia, as well as Central Asia, as well as up into the Baltics, as well as in Georgia and Armenia, it was my job to fix it when things went wrong. From time to time, when a decision had to be made, it was my responsibility to make those decisions. This point that I'm going to try to make is so complicated. So please, if at all possible, listen to my heart, not just my words. Instead of continuing to faith things that God will do what needs to be done, we read all of these great things that Abram does in chapter 12, and then sadly, when we see chapter 12 verses 10 through 20, about a year later, Abram and Sarah are going to Egypt. And he's afraid of what might happen. And he says, when we get to Egypt, you tell everybody you're my sister. He tries to fix things. And as they're waiting faithfully for that child to be born, we read the entire chapter, Genesis chapter 17. And Sarah's talking to Abram. Many years have gone by. It's been God's promise, but now many years have gone by. Not just a few days, many years. And we don't have the child yet. Maybe this is what we ought to do. We ought to hasten God's plan. We need to fix things. And then again, in Genesis chapter 22, verse 18, about 24 years later, Abraham does a similar thing with a person called Abimelech, where there's fear. And he says, hey, when we go there, you tell people that you're my sister. Because if they know that you're my wife, they might kill me so that they can have you. When God's children don't live by God's standards, when they give in to fear, and you and I spend far too much of our lives in fear, we can say appropriately the Bible verses that perfect love casts out fear. We can say the perfect Bible verses that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power. We can voice the correct words of faith, but then we can try to fix things as we try to manage our fears. And you and I know that when we don't live by God's standards, resentment builds up in our hearts. So when we read what happens in Genesis chapter 17, it's a cautionary tale that if I'm not living according to God's standards as God's child, I can give in to fear and I can start being resentful, and ultimately that's going to lead to regret. Oh, that Ishmael might be the one that you would bless. And God says, no. I spoke to you. I explained to you. This is not a surprise. You knew what you were supposed to do. When God's children don't live by God's standards, they become less than they could be. You want to be the best version of you that you can be? The Army might help you out. You might join the Marines and be one of the few, one of the proud. But you'll only be who you truly are meant to be as you live obedient to God's call upon your life. Some of you know right now, regardless of your age, you're going to be serving in another country, sharing the good news of Jesus Christ as a missionary. You know that. Some of you know right now, this week, there is somebody at your office that you need to bless. You know it. Some of you pass a crotchety old biddy. Oh, she's just so resentful. Oh, she spits and the grass catches fire. And you know that she's bitter and resentful, but you also know that God put her in your pathway, because if you don't find a way to bless her, she'll never be blessed. You know it. You know it. But if we don't live by God's standards, other people are hurt instead of blessed. And ultimately, there are unintended consequences that can be severe and long-lasting. Christians are being persecuted at unprecedented rates. And often we can go back to Genesis chapter 17 and say, it wasn't supposed to be like that. But Abraham, at a crucial moment, tried to fix it instead of faithing it. Who am I to criticize Abraham? No, I am not worthy. As I was asked to preach one time with Korean brothers, as I came to the pulpit, very politely but gently, I was stopped and I was told, remove your shoes. You do not step into this pulpit with your shoes on. For us, this is holy ground. You remove your shoes. When I am standing in the presence of Abraham. Who am I to criticize that man? When I look at my own life, and I know that at crucial moments, instead of being a man of faith, I was a man who tried to fix it. Oh, I knew better, but I had logical reasons. A lot of time had gone by. You know, these people, they really could hurt me. Oh, I had all the good answers. But in my heart, I knew when God was calling me. Are you still waiting for God's promise to be fulfilled? If God has spoken to your heart and has promised you something, that promise will be fulfilled. As you are waiting, are you tempted to fix it rather than faith it? And instead of looking at somebody else, as you and I take a hard look at ourselves, what self-destructive tendencies do you have? Oh, we don't call them that. We call them little flaws. It's just the way my culture is. It's just the tradition I'm from. You know, it's just the way I was brought up. Oh, we have all kinds of ways to cover over our self-destructive tendencies. You might not be tempted to be a fix-it man. Don't you sit there and judge me. You're tempted by something. We all are. And when God's children don't live by God's standards, not only are God's children hurt, poor bunch of fishermen, what had they done wrong? Bunch of sailors, I don't know if they were fishermen. How did they get stuck with Jonah in their boat? You see, when God's children don't do what they're supposed to do, it doesn't only affect them, it affects the other people in the boat also. To me, this is a very sobering message, and it stands as a cautionary tale. And I in no way am worthy to criticize Abraham, this mighty man of God. But I can look at my own life, and I can realize that fear will lead to resentment and ultimately regret if I am not careful with how I live my life. Let's pray.